Hey, it's a beautiful afternoon here in New Orleans, and this is the fun video about liens. Well, across the street and two doors to the left from where I live was a man named Mr. Bob. Mr. Bob wasn't completely there, let's say, and he amused himself before garbage day of going into everybody's garbage cans, and anything he found that was interesting, he would take it to his backyard and throw it over his fence into his backyard. But you can imagine after about 2 years what condition that backyard was in. Raccoons and possums and roaches and rodents of unusual size, and everything was in there. Well, the local governmental officials finally got fed up with Mr. Bob, and one day, as I was pulling out to go to work, I noticed that there were oodles of police cars on the street and even more local government dump trucks on the street. And what was happening is that the governmental authorities had torn down Mr. Bob's gate, and workers were going into his backyard and pulling all the junk out and throwing it into dump trucks. Now, the question is this: should the local government be concerned that it's not going to get paid for the money it spent cleaning up Mr. Bob's property? And the answer is no, because just like a creditor is going to have a lien against a piece of property, if that plumber, let's say, has done work on the property, in the same way the government in this case cleaned up Mr. Bob's property and put a lien against his property. And the next year Mr. Bob died, and before his heirs could sell the house, they had to pay off that lien. Now, this next story has nothing to do with liens, has nothing to do with this course, but it is a very interesting story, and it's called the Skeleton Man story. And what it's got connected with liens is that it also occurred right on our block. Well, we were visiting our daughter out of state a few years back, and Mr. Dave across the street was taking care of our dog at the time, and he was so good with the dog. He never bothered us. The dog loved him. But one day, I got a call at our daughter's house out of state, and it was Mr. Dave on the phone. And he said, "Chris, you won't believe it. Every video truck on earth is on our block from every TV station." I said, "Wow, what's happening?" And he explained what was happening. It seems like across the street and four doors to the right lived a Mr. Jones with his elderly father. And Mr. Jones had a sister who he didn't get along with, and he and his sister never talked, but the sister became concerned. She never heard from her father because he lived with her brother, whom she never spoke to. So one day the sister called up the local sheriff's office and said, "Would you please send a unit over to my brother's house? There's nothing wrong. I just haven't heard from my father in forever. I just want the peace of mind that he's doing just fine." Well, it must have been a slow police day, because the sheriff sent a car, and two policemen pulled up to Mr. Jones' house, knocked on the door. "Hello, could we speak with Mr. Jones, please?" And the 55-year-old man said, "Yes, I'm Mr. Jones." And the police said, "No, we want to speak to the elder Mr. Jones, your father." The man got a faraway look and then finally said, "Follow me." He led the policeman upstairs, opened the door to an upstairs bedroom where the elder Mr. Jones was in bed, the same bed that he had died in 2 years before and had never been touched since then. Oh my goodness. My students usually at this point ask, "What did the place smell like?" Well, I don't want to know what the place smelled like. Well, Mr. Jones had told the police, "Well, Dad died right after Hurricane Katrina, and I really was so in an emotional state about the hurricane that I couldn't deal with Dad's death, and I just shut the door and didn't open it. So the police wrote him a citation for mistreating a dead body. It was a misdemeanor, and they went on their way. Well, the police did call the coroner, of course, who said, well, I can't test skeletons. I've got to send this to the state coroner. And so 6 weeks later, the police cars are back, the video trucks are back, everything is back. The police are arresting, this time, Mr. Jones, because the state coroner found that Dad had 26 broken bones when he died. And of course, Mr. Jones was being arrested. The jury did not believe his story when he said Dad must have fallen out of bed and broken 26 bones. And you can send Mr. Jones's mail to the state penitentiary. Okay.